All right, everybody. Hello and welcome. David Kinder here, and I am the admin for the Professional Life Insurance Agent Discussion Group. And I am thrilled to have with us author, speaker, podcaster, YouTuber. I don't know. You throw all the acronyms out there. I have David McKnight here with us today, and we're talking about his newly published book, The Guru Gap. Now, if you need more of an introduction of David McKnight, too bad. You should know him by now. Uh, He's been a great author, speaker, and advocate for the financial services industry. And I had a chance to read Dave's book. So first, welcome, Dave. Glad to have you. Um,
Thank you.
and
Thank you for having
here's
me.
and I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask you, but I just kind of want to start off that this book really helps to clarify the myths from truth and facts of what a lot of these, and I'm going to use a provocative term, financial pornographers are putting out there. So I am not just saying financial entertainers, they're a financial pornographer because they knowingly or unknowingly misconstrue the truth and the facts of how we as financial professionals are trying to serve our clients to give them the best outcomes. And they are just smearing us left and right. And it's just so annoying. And whether everybody else knows it or not, Dave and I are of the same faith. And I'm going to use a term that they mingle these terms. They mingle it, and so the public does not necessarily know where to go for their best interest advice. So I wanted to put that out there because you're helping to bring clarity on these things, and it's not necessarily an attack, but yeah, it is. Uh, I'll clarify it that way. So what
Your your
inspired?
your your assessment after having read the book is that that it is indeed an attack. So that's interesting, um, because it may well be perceived that way when people read it. I mean, that wasn't. It's not a financial hit piece. That wasn't my goal, but that may end up being in the end what people perceive it as because I don't mince my words when it comes to assessing some of their statements that they make about some financial tools that math and actuarial science really corroborate, when it comes to our clients wringing the most efficiency out of their retirement savings. So I'm glad to hear that feedback.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the difference between confidence and arrogance. And basically, if they like you, it's confidence. If they hate you, it's arrogance. And it's the same thing. So it depends on which side of the aisle they happen to be on. And if they don't like the book, we can really pretty much tell where they're coming from. Um, so reading the book, by the way, for everybody that has not yet read it and not yet bought it, it's a pretty easy read for a financial advisor to read. It took me, I don't know, about an hour. I read right through it. You're going to get the narrative very quickly. But what inspired you to create this book? I can guess, but I want to hear that from you.
Well, I started off in the financial services industry back in 1997, which is really before Al Gore had really ever invented the internet. And so when I made a recommendation, I sold a lot of VUL when I started out, and when I made a recommendation, you're like, okay, I'm gonna vet this out with my father-in-law. I'm going to see what my neighbor thinks about this. I'm going to talk to my tax preparer and see what he says. And that was really the extent to which people vetted out our recommendations. And so very rarely would somebody come back and say, yeah, I talked to so and so and they don't think VUL is a great idea. I think I'm going to try something else. Nice knowing you. That almost never happened. And people would never ghost me. They would never just stop meeting with me. But here we are in 2024. We're in a totally different world. The internet is full of opinions, particularly in the ones that rise to the top of the search results are typically the ones of people who have the biggest mainstream platforms. And those are the five people I talk about in the book: Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, Clark Howard. By the way, a lot of people don't know who Clark Howard is, but Dave, when
Mhm.
you and I graduated from college, he was like the Dave Ramsey of his day. He was on every radio show across the country. He was nationally syndicated. Everybody knew who Clark Howard was. And
Mhm.
so we talk about Clark Howard, we talk about Ken Fisher, particularly when it comes to annuities, and then the latest guru on the scene, which is Ramit Sethi of Netflix fame. So
Right.
these are the opinions that people are going to be sort of imbibing when they take to the internet to vet out our recommendations. And what are the types of things that they are going to see on the internet? Well, Dave Ramsey says The only people that ever get cash value life insurance are either dupes or they just haven't researched it enough. 100% cash value sucks 100% of the time. The only, if you do happen to have a cash value life insurance policy, you should surrender it immediately, regardless of regardless of the surrender charges. Take the proceeds and buy a term insurance policy from Zander Insurance. Susie Orman says if anybody ever talks about cash value life insurance, you are to shut down the conversation immediately and never work with that person again. Who do we have left? Clark Howard says it's a steaming hot pile of garbage. And the only person that's willing to sell it to you is a money grubbing, commission hungry, somebody knocking on my door, a money grubbing, commission hungry, life insurance salesman. Don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So when it comes to annuities, Ken Fisher says, I'd rather go to hell than sell you an annuity. He's trademarked the phrase, I hate annuities and so should you. So this is what our clients are going to see when 90% of the time they take to the internet to research our recommendations. So the question is, if we know this is going to happen, yet we also know that what we're recommending is a financially viable, backed by decades of research and reams of academic studies, and the most important experts in the world have been studying this. You've got, Wade Pfau, who wrote the foreword for the book, Michael Finke, David Blanchett, all of these experts, Mosh Milevsky, that have done years and years of research on these types of recommendations. Why is it that our customers can then go to the internet and get completely the different opinion? And what can we do to inoculate our clients against what they're likely to see when they do vet out our recommendations on, in cyberspace? And so really the inspiration behind this book was we've got to really be able to preemptively shield ourselves, our clients, from what they're likely to see when they research our recommendations. And we need to be familiar with the criticisms, and we need to be familiar with the answers that can help debunk those criticisms. And so I really wanted to provide the industry with a tool that people can use to bone up on those criticisms and really shield their clients from what they're likely to see when they head online.
Well, it's so true. And here's the thing for the client perspective is that they see all these authorities. First of all, let's go through the client logic a little bit. These people are on the radio. They must be doing something right. They must be advocating for the client, right? And they've got all these people that listen to them. They've got social clout, right? That's what they've got as their advantage, which not too many people in our space really have. I think the top one might right now be Tom Hegna, right? And glad for him. He's on PBS. He, of course, he's semi-retired now. But we really don't have a big spokesperson for that. Now, and the neat thing is that for those of us that have the skill and the discipline, the proclivity to write, we can at least get our message out there so that there's another voice to be considered that will hopefully emphasize a a a factual, not necessarily non-biased. I freely admit I am not in a nonprofit organization. I am here to make an income and make a living for myself. I am not unbiased, but that doesn't mean that I don't want the client to be better off. The client must be better off for working with me than without. And as long as I can put them in a better place, but the bias is there, and the impression of non-biased advice is obviously there. And I think one of the best things I can think of is to be able to put the clarity in writing. And that is one of the best things to do because people don't always, what's the saying? We don't believe everything you hear, but seeing is believing. And at least with a book or, like the things that you have your YouTube channel. I've got my YouTube channel. I've got my blog. We've got all the different things out there that at least people can slow down a little bit, read it through, listen to it, take the time. Um, but there had to have been the impetus. I read, of course, the beginning of the book. What was the impetus that made you just say, now's the time to write this thing? Because you've been
Well, so
you've been commenting on TikTokers and such all this time. I follow your
yes,
channel, of course. They're a whole nother
yes.
plague.
Yeah. So, people say, Dave, why this book right now? And you know what? I've had an axe to grind against these guys for the last 20 years. I mean, how many of us have lost dozens and dozens of prospects because Either they've told us that they've researched us online and Dave Ramsey says that they don't like our recommendations, or they just ghosted us. We never heard from them ever again, and we don't know why. Well, there's a pretty good chance it's because they compared our recommendation to what Dave Ramsey and Suze Orman have to say. And so I've had a bone to pick with all of these gurus over the last 20 years. And because I wrote The Power of Zero, and because I have a platform and I have a literary agent that allows me to gain access to some of these mainstream publishers, not only do I have an axe to grind against these gurus, in a very loving way, by the way, but I also have the ability to write a book about it that's going to have some eyes put on it. So really, why is this book being written now when it could have been written so long ago? Well, so a lot of people have bones to pick with Dave Ramsey on one or two areas. For example, Michael Finke, very well known in our industry, PhD. He has written articles about Dave Ramsey and the 8% distribution rate, right? So he's sort of a one topic guy when it comes to Dave Ramsey. Wade Fowle has a problem with 100% stocks in retirement, right?
Mhm.
12% linear returns year over year over year. So he writes an article on that. I have a problem with all of that stuff, but I also have a problem with his characterization of annuities. I have a problem with his characterization of cash value life insurance. And I have enough of a bone to pick with these people that it's actually can fill a book. And so not only do I have the frustration that I need to give voice to, but I have the platform, I believe, to help really make a splash when this book, and I'll be very upfront with everybody on this call. My goal is for this to be a New York Times bestseller. It's already well on its way to becoming a USA Today bestseller, but I want it to be a
Oh,
New York
nice.
Times bestseller. I want Dave Ramsey to wake up the morning of December 17th, which is the week following when it gets published, when these types of things get published in the New York
Mm.
Times. I want him to wake up to an inbox full of emails from everybody that he knows. He says, "A book about you, Dave, just hit the New York Times bestseller. We've got to prepare a response." And so I want to force Dave Ramsey to acknowledge that there are mainstream books out there that are taking a critical eye, taking a critical look at what he said, and put him in a position where he has to acknowledge what we're saying, and then really the goal here is to advance the dialogue around sustainable planning principles and move the football down the field on helping America understand that there's a huge, you know, financial tool belt that that people can avail themselves of that will dramatically increase the likelihood that their money will last as long as they do. So, Mike is asking how many books have to be sold. It's really between 8 and 10,000. We're already at about 4,000. That gets you on the USA Today bestseller. We need to sell another 6,000 in the next month. I think we can do it. Um, I've got another webinar tonight with 500 people on it. And so if everybody buys a book and everybody who hears my voice buys a book or 10 or 20 or 50, I think we can make it. But it has to be sort of a group effort. And I hope everybody shares my vision here of trying to take this discussion mainstream, and that one of the best ways to do it is to have a book that hits one of the bestseller lists where we can force some of these gurus to acknowledge that there's a huge contingent of advisors that take issue with what they're saying, and hopefully that makes some headway with the huge swath of America.
Oh, no, I'm all on board with that. So basically, we need advisors to be buying these by the case. Do you have a
I
discount code? Yeah, we can figure
Yes, I
that
do
out.
actually. I actually
Oh,
do have a
wonderful. Well, we can
discount
throw
code.
that. We throw
I'll
that in
share
the
that with
chat there.
you before the end of the call for sure.
Now, one of the things I was curious is how do you see advisors using this book with their clients? Because sometimes if I've meeting with someone and they're so brainwashed, I'm usually like, you know what, I'm just not the person to help you. Appreciate your time, and I'm
Yeah,
moving on, and I'm going to let
yeah,
them be where they're at. And then there you got
right.
almost everybody, I believe, that say I don't even listen to those people. I don't bring them up unless they bring them up. I'm not bringing them up. Why would I invite someone to the conversation when they're not there sitting with me? So
Right.
there's got to be that middle ground. How would you advise, especially like your Power Zero advisors, how would you advise them to use this book? What circumstances would you use this to hand out, or would you use it more like an inoculation tool, saying you're going to learn about some things from other people? This is a book to help put some of these rumors to rest. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit of how I went about writing this book, and Dave, you'll probably vouch for this since you're one of the 5 people in the world that's read the book so far.
Okay.
I don't know if you realize that nobody's read it because it doesn't publish until December 10th, and so I've only actually given it to the people who have been hosting the webinar that have actually requested it. And Dave, you're one of only 2 or 3 people that have actually asked for it. So what I did in this book is I took the most important parts I think of Power of Zero, tax-free income for life, volatility shield, and look before you lerp. And I distilled the most important parts into the book, and I wove them into the narrative around the things that financial gurus say and why and how to debunk them. So I'm essentially taking the best parts of the Power Zero approach and using them to debunk all of these statements that these financial gurus have made over the years. And so in essence, you're accomplishing 2 things at once. You're setting the table for a Power of Zero type sale, but you're also preemptively debunking the types of criticisms that they're going to see of the Power of Zero approach online before the client ever gets to look at them, right? And so you're really setting the table for the sale, and then you're inoculating the client against what they're likely to see when they research it. And so to me, it's even better than the Power of Zero in the sense that not only does it lay out the plan, but it sort of bulletproofs the plan against what any of these detractors are going to say online. And so that's why I think it really is something that you just pass along to a client or prospect. Read this book. I'll call back in a week. Let me know what you think, and get a stack of them, hand them out to your best prospects, and it's a great way to start the conversation.
Wow, excellent. Yeah. So, and when I was reading the book, and I'm coming up with, but I will write you a review. I'll put it on Amazon. Um, but there's another book that was written 55 years ago. You may not be familiar with it. It's called The Tired Tirade by Halsey Josephson, CLU, and it was
Cool.
written, published in 1969. And the whole idea was to debunk a whole lot of the common objections that come up. This book is kind of in that spirit of it, other than the fact that it's modern. It's the current dialogue that's going on from everybody. And and by the way, and it's not necessarily just mainstream financial pornographers, as I call them. It's also the fact that people parrot them. It's like, well, I heard from this guy you should be doing this. I heard from this guy you should be doing this. Well, let's look at what the top people who have originated those quotes. By the way, just so everybody knows, A.L. Williams did not originate buy term and invested difference, but he did co-opt it and practically trademark it for himself. Um, I think it's a good idea for uh, distilling those objections and bringing them down to a factual, common sense thing. And it's not attacking. Our goal is to bring the math, bring the clarity so that someone can make a clear, concise decision that's in their best interest that they feel the most comfortable with. One of the things I actually really appreciate, it's later in the book, where you actually say having less money in life insurance can be for your benefit. So you're actually taking on the fact that, because life insurance, let's put out there, it's a horrible investment if you're going to use that term, because it does not accumulate as much of a dollar amount in the contract. And I don't care which version you sell. We're not going to be debating IUL versus whole life. They both have similar returns. Don't kill me on that one. But they're both a similar projection of performance, right? And so, but knowing that you're gonna have less money in it, but realize that you could get a higher distribution rate and how it's deployed for the client is everything. So I really love that you brought that out so that you can even say, we're not promising you the greatest returns, but where your money is more important, and how it can be deployed and used and implemented in someone's financial plan. So I love that message. Um, I know I'm going somewhere with that, but that's okay. That's just what I'm thinking about. So, um, real quick,
Well, I do. I mean, if I can just comment on that, I really, whether you're an IUL guy or a whole life guy, and we're not going to litigate that one today, as we promised at the outset. Um, you know, I really, if you, in case you can't tell, I've talked about it in 3 of my last 3 books. I love using cash value life insurance as a volatility shield or volatility buffer, as Wade Pfau calls it. Basically, the idea here is you accumulate 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses in your cash value life insurance policy by day one of retirement. And then the year following a down year in the stock market, you pay for your living expenses out of your cash value. And that what that does is it gives your stock market portfolio a chance to recover before you take further distributions. And that act alone will double your sustainable withdrawal rate on your retirement portfolio from 4 to 8% with a 95% success rate. So if you were to go to Dave Ramsey and say, what do you think about the volatility buffer concept? He wouldn't have any clue what you're talking about. If you went to, Susie Orman, they just don't have any clue. I mean, Ernst and Young, their recent study says you are perfectly justified in redirecting 30% of your retirement contributions to cash value life insurance because the net effect is of doubling the sustainable withdrawal rate on the rest of your assets. I mean, you cannot overstate the importance of being able to pull that off. I mean, the grand irony in all of this, Dave, is that the only way to get that 8% withdrawal rate in retirement that Dave Ramsey claims is to use a financial tool, cash value life insurance, that he categorically rejects. And so that's the great irony in all of this. And I'm sure to point that out in the book that this is something that Dave Ramsey would dismiss out of hand. And the same goes for what Ken Fisher says about annuities. I mean, the bottom line is the goal that everybody has is to make sure that their money lasts through life expectancy. Their number one fear across the board,
Yes.
it's not tax rate risk as I wish. It's really, their greatest fear is running out of money before they run out of life. And so the question becomes, what is the least expensive way to pull that off? Is it the 4% rule that Ken Fisher so adamantly sort of backs? Or is there a different way to purge longevity risk from your life in a way that's much less expensive to do so? And the example I give in the book is that if you take the Ken Fisher way, it's going to cost you, if you need $40,000 adjusted for inflation year over year, it's going to cost you $1 million. That's the Ken Fisher way. If you take the annuity approach at the time of the writing of the book, you would have had to allocate $650,000 to an annuity. What does that do? It frees up $350,000 to be able to do some really interesting things. Put money into an LIRP to have a volatility buffer and get long-term care protection. Put money in some sort of emergency fund discretionary account so that you can take that trip around the world or repair the hole in your roof or to replace your carburetor or what have you. You just can't do that with the Ken Fisher approach. And so these are the types of things that PhDs and reams of academic studies point to. And these are the types of things I've tried to weave into the narrative of the book so that people can say, look, it doesn't matter what your opinion is. It doesn't matter what my opinion is. The only thing that matters is math. And that's the real reason that's a real way to tell if a financial guru is lying to you. Is it supported by math and actuarial science? That's the only thing that matters. And so that's why my approach in this whole enterprise was to try to weave as much math into the narrative as possible.
Now, as kind of a bonus for everybody showing up here, I'm going to share my screen real quick because if you haven't seen this, I've shared this a few times. If you're not familiar with who David Walker is, David Walker, former U.S. Comptroller of the United States, basically the chief accountant back through the Bush years. This is what he said about Fisher Investments. So everybody get a screenshot of that, put that in your arsenal, and say, do you really want to piss off the chief accountant of the United States with your portfolio management? And so anyway, this was, I think, about 3 years ago or so, maybe four. But this is off of LinkedIn. He posted it, and I finally met David Walker about a couple months ago through a mutual podcast. So anyway, he's just eviscerating them on their portfolio management. They're not what they claim to be. They do not have performance-based fees, despite the strong inference to the contrary from their ads. They did not come close to beating the market in the past year for me. Last week, they lost 2.5 times more than the market. They had at least 8 total dog stocks in their standard portfolio. In addition, their bond duration is too long given current market conditions expectations. I'm like, you do not want to peeve off this guy. So I throw that out there in case it ever comes up. You can have that in your arsenal and say, hey, that's what the chief accountant of the United States said. I just thought you might find that interesting. Um,
How long ago
so
was this, Dave?
I think about 3 years ago, maybe four.
Wow. I
Um,
was not aware of this. This is extremely compelling.
yeah, that's a fun one. So I really enjoyed that one. Um, and if anybody happens to be following me on the Financial Advocacy Podcast, cheap intro to commercial for me there. Um, uh, I think my second or third episode, we actually dispelled Dave Ramsey's 12% mutual fund myth. It's actually not a myth. That's the interesting thing because I found a clip of him describing a fund in detail. I'm like, wait a minute, that's too specific. And so I found out what it was is American Funds, and it was American Funds that says some of this stuff. So I'm going to share my other screen here just to share because you need to be able to show that Dave Ramsey's still smart, but so are you. So this is and I think this is last year, Investment Company of America, American Funds from Capital Group. And the neat thing is that since I'm not a registered rep, I get to mark this thing up any way I want. If you're a registered rep, you cannot mark up a prospectus for anything. I think you can mark up literature. But this is what American Fund says, and this is what Dave has been saying. An investment in ICA has never lost money over a 10 or 20 calendar year period in the fund's lifetime. Over its lifetime since January 1st, 1934 through end of 2022, has returned an average of 11.82 annually compared to the 10.84. So obviously he rounded up 12% mutual fund. Well, that's where it came from. And so I did some math on that. And if the math that I did was I put $1 million into Investment Company of America Class A, and I did it for $1 million for the primary reason that at $1 million, there's no breakpoints to have to calculate. And then I figured out if we did 8% distribution, not even adjusting for inflation, 8% flat each and every year, they ran out of money in 16 years. And I did this with an Excel spreadsheet just because that's all I had. If I was a registered rep, I could use their actual approved illustration system and everything. I don't have access to that. So, oh well. Um, Granted, the 8% kind of worked. And I rearranged the returns and stuff just to see. I'm just like, but Dave Ramsey's investment advice, if you could call it advice, versus retirement income advice, two different things. And I would never want to conflate the two because who's left holding the bag? It's the client. The client ends up holding the bag, and think about it. Dave Ramsey, great spokesperson. He also has his endorsed local providers, right? Because those are
They
people
fixed my
that
camera
buy
real quick.
in. I I see rainbow lines on you. I don't see anything else. Did you want to share your screen? Um,
Nope, I'm just fixing I think my battery ran out, so stand by.
no problem. I can still keep talking. I could talk about this for
Keep
hours,
talking.
uh, but the problem is that it's the client that's left holding the bag, and you can't hold Dave Ramsey accountable for your own decisions, and that's I think part of the problem too. Um, if you say I follow Dave Ramsey, well, although there is that lawsuit, I don't think we've heard anything new about it yet. Wasn't there the timeshare recovery
Handle, right?
lawsuit?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we haven't heard anything about that. Of course, he endorsed
No,
them. I don't
nothing's
think he
resolved on that yet.
guaranteed.
It's just a really big scandal, and there's a lot of money at stake there. And if it doesn't go his way, his billion-dollar net worth is going to be substantially lower, after the money gets handed out. I mean, it's something on the order of a $250 million lawsuit, something like that.
Ooh, okay. Well, reportedly, I have heard this through the grapevine. I really wish I could prove this. I've heard that Dave Ramsey has a nice large 10-pay whole life insurance policy from Guardian. I've heard of people who know the agent that sold it. I wish I could substantiate it. I wish I had proof. That would be the greatest thing in the world. I keep hearing it, and I have to keep saying, I hear this through the grapevine. I've heard this from substantial, but I can't substantiate it. I wish I could, because that at least he'd have that protection if he funded that thing well, because of the creditor protections available in life insurance, annuities, and qualified plans. Um,
Well, let me just say this. I like Dave Ramsey. I think the world's better off. I think our country's better off for him being in it than not. I think Susie Orman, I really like Susie Orman. I think I agree with her on almost everything. I mean, she says that tax rates 10 years from now are going to skyrocket. I mean, she's totally on the
yeah,
same page, but I just don't agree with any of what she says on cash value life insurance and annuities. It just doesn't add up. But she's really
right.
good. I mean, she isn't doing things like, hey, take 8% withdrawal rate. She says it's 4%, maybe even 3%. So I mean,
Yeah.
she's sort of like more locked in with mainstream financial thought than Dave Ramsey is. I mean, Dave Ramsey's operated entirely outside the mainstream consensus when it comes to these types of things. And so I talk often about what we call the Dave Ramsey circle of poverty. I mean, his superpower is getting people out of debt. I mean, he should stay in his lane. If you're making 50 per year and spending 60, he's precisely the person you should be talking to. So
True.
he's very good at getting people out of debt and getting them on the road to financial independence, even turning people into millionaires. He's turned a lot of people into millionaires. People reach out to me all the time. How dare you? Dave Ramsey turned me into a millionaire. But here's the problem. By the time you're a millionaire, he tells you to take that, leave your money 100% stocks and take an 8% withdrawal rate, at which point he promptly bankrupts you again because you have a 62% chance of going bankrupt prior to life expectancy by adopting that approach. So it's a Dave Ramsey circle of poverty. Starts you off in poverty, gets you to rich, and promptly bankrupts you. So this is stuff that he needs to account for. And I think that the more eyes we can get on this book, the more we can sort of raise the level of consensus across America that something doesn't add up. And, I've got a theory as to why Dave Ramsey refuses to admit defeat when it comes to this particular topic, because he gets beat up all the time by cadres of CFPs and people writing articles about him all the time. And when he had that one, when he cracked down on his co-host George Camel a couple of months ago,
Hmm.
because George Camel seemed to be endorsing the 4% rule, and he went off on George on one of his things. I did a video on that sort of went viral.
Yep.
Dave Ramsey refuses to back down because if he's wrong on something as important as distribution rates in retirement, people immediately start to ask, well, what else has he been wrong about? And all of a sudden, you've got a chink in that armor. And then the floodgates open. And now all of a sudden, people think that maybe he's wrong about cash value life insurance. Maybe he's wrong about, annuities. And so he has to maintain this air of infallibility, and he refuses to acknowledge when he's made a mistake. And so even in that video, you could see his daughter. She's like, well, maybe 5% would be okay. He's like, no, you can do 8, 9, 10%. It's good, perfectly okay. Why would you steal hope from someone? So this is a point that I make in the book. Dave Ramsey is all about giving people hope. If you can only grow your money at 8% and you can only take a 4% withdrawal rate, you're going to have to save 5 times as much money as the person who can get a 12% sustainable return on their investments and then can take 8% withdrawal rates. It's just,
Yeah.
and so what Dave Ramsey is doing is saying, I don't want to steal people's hope. I don't want to make it seem like becoming financially independent is too far out of reach. So I'm going to dumb down all the numbers. I'm going to make it seem much more realistic than it really is. The problem with that is, yes, you will get people off of square one and get them to a million, to have $1 million because you gave them the inspiration to do so, but you're going to bankrupt them 63% of the time once they do get to retirement. And so that's the problem with this whole operation here, is that you just have to tell the truth. When you tell the truth, people don't get hurt and they appreciate you for being straightforward. And that's really a motto to live by.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with you with Susie Orman. Susie, of course, actually has been a licensed financial advisor. She spent a few years at Merrill Lynch. In fact, she even sued Merrill Lynch because of the management of her, I think it was her mom's or her grandmother's portfolio for all the churning that was going on in there. She won that complaint. And of everybody we've talked about, Susie is the only one that ever got the CFP mark. So she actually has true financial planning uh, training and education. So I do take her things far more, usually with more acceptance, other than
Right.
cash value life insurance. In fact, I've got a blog article where she eviscerates somebody for buying a variable life policy. And I did some analysis. And the fact is, she should have asked far more questions, but she's on the radio or the television. You don't have time to be a true advisor. You just have time to spit out an opinion and get everybody else on your side, and then paint the industry as evil for you. The industry they just want their commission. They're not looking for your best interest. We're looking to make sure that you're really better off because I have no dog in this hunt. That's why I'm giving you the real advice. That's the idea of behind some of these guys, and it's very effective. We got to admit it is very effective. So the only thing I could think of is we got to get our voice out there, and ideally through print, through social media, because I'm seeing all the clowns. The good news is I can either just block them or just scroll up. It's so much easier to just I don't want to engage. It drives me nuts, and I can get riled up just as much as anybody. And if I pause to try to respond to everybody, I won't get anything done, and I'll just be in a constant state of frustration the entire day, and that doesn't serve me or my own internal peace in any way possible. Um, Now, David, when you were writing this book, was there anything new that popped up? Because when we're writing something, when we're writing a blog or we're creating a video, we know that's going to be out there. We're now on the record for what we're saying. And so you got to make sure we're doing our research, we're citing our sources and things just to make sure that, something comes back. At least we did our homework. Was there anything new that you discovered in the writing of this book that you were surprised to learn?
Yeah, when you write a book like this, you have to do a deep dive on everything that these folks have said. You have to go way back in time and figure out how their theories have evolved over time and sort of try to understand why they believe the things that they believe. And in the process of vetting out all of these different gurus and figuring out where they really stand on all of these issues, you come to a really profound understanding of what they believe in their heart of hearts. And what I found is that for the most part, these are all good people. They're authentic. I believe they have our best interests at heart. But in the parts where I disagree with them, I found that when I researched them profoundly, when I really did a deep dive, they were way more wrong on these subjects than I initially thought. And I'll give you an example of Roth conversions. And Wade Pfau really calls this out. If you remember in the forward for the book, Dave Ramsey was telling me, he said, I had no idea that, pardon me, Wade Pfau was telling me, I had no idea that Dave Ramsey believed these things about Roth conversions. He believes that that you should not do a Roth conversion if you're within 5 years of retirement. And he gives no real explanation for why. And Wade Pfau says the closer you get to retirement, the more you should be getting ready to do a Roth conversion, because the instant you retire, you tend to have a lower tax bracket, in which case it's the perfect time to consider Roth conversion. Dave Ramsey says you should never do a Roth conversion unless you have the cash with which to pay the tax on the Roth conversion. Well, we all know that you're mathematically better off if you do have the cash to pay the tax on the Roth conversion. But Wade Pfau says, but that doesn't mean that if you don't have the cash, you should simply sit on the train tracks and let that tax freight train absolutely destroy your retirement. Paying the tax out of the Roth conversion itself is better than not doing anything at all. And the math bears that out. And so, you do a deep dive on these gurus and you start to realize, wow, in the areas where I disagree with them, I disagree with them way more by the time I finish the book than I did at the outset. And so I think that was probably my biggest surprise, is just realizing. And the interesting thing was, I don't know if there's a spy on the inside of all these organizations, but a lot of the quotes that I use in my book when I started writing the book, and then when you do it through a mainstream publisher, they have a half dozen editors that go through it and vet out everything. And where is this quote from? And where is that quote from? And when I went back and tried to find the quote, I couldn't find it. It's like they took it down. And so I had to go to the Wayback Machine. The internet
Yes,
never
I
forgets.
love that thing.
There's something called the Wayback Machine. And the Wayback Machine will tell you what the internet said on any given day in history. So you can actually go back and find stuff even after people take stuff down. And so I had to go back and find these quotes and realize that technically speaking, Dave Ramsey has shifted some of his positions on this stuff, and you could write a whole nother book on this on the positions that he shifted over the years, based on just analyzing various statements on various topics using the Wayback Machine. And so that's sort of interesting. He's shifted positions and still wrong. Like when it comes to Roth conversions, he doesn't have any nuance. He doesn't say, for example, that the 24% tax bracket is a sweet spot in the Trump tax cuts. He doesn't say that, that you should leave some money in your tax deferred bucket because you're going to have a standard deduction in retirement that you can use to offset your required minimum distributions. He doesn't do anything like that. It's just distill it into a 10-second soundbite, give you a couple of different rules to live by, and call it a day. I mean, there's no nuance in those recommendations. And I love this cover for the book. You got the guy on the left, and you've got the destination pin on the right, and you've got this yawning chasm between where the guy is and where he needs to be. And that really represents where the financial guru with their one size fits all, paint by the number approach, where their advice stops. It's at the edge of that chasm, and where the client needs to get to wring the most efficiency out of their retirement savings. So they need a bridge. They need some sort of way to bridge the shortfall in that financial advice that they're getting so that they can wring the most efficiency out of their retirement savings. And so I love the book. I love the cover, because if you didn't read any of the book at all, you could sort of sort of piece together what the story is about before you ever crack it open.
Well, and for me, I saw it as cognitive dissonance. You got values on one side, values on the other. Who you're going to listen to? We got to bring that together so that someone can see it clearly and then make informed decisions on it. And so for me, as we're talking, I'm thinking this book, it's not necessarily a sales book, but it does help to clear the weeds. It helps to clear out the stumps so that someone can make a more informed decision so that they've got the clarity behind it. Um, and you go through a lot of, I had a list of all of these, but you go through all of the risks of retirement. So anybody that has, and I'll just call it out, if you have the RSCP designation, they talk about the 18 risks of retirement. Your book covers all of those and comparing the advice that's being promoted versus the truth and the facts and the math, to help people understand that even if we take that Roth conversion thing, if we take, and there's more biases in there too, and I'll bring that out. But think about the financial fiduciaries, which this isn't the subject of this book, but the fiduciaries that say that we want to have all of your money and assets under management. Well, we make a fee off of the entire gross value of that account, regardless of how much of it actually belongs to you. And so when you're actually taking out money each and every year for that Roth conversion, if you're taking it out of the out of the distribution to pay the taxes, there's less money for you to manage, less money for you to be paid on, and that is a conflict of interest that does not have to be disclosed by law. And yet that's part of that. And yet it's the same logic there. And yet, if I'm going to bridge us through, if you put the money towards something like cash value life insurance, where you've shown that having less money in there, but you can still have a higher distribution rate, that means you could still have the advantages of that, and you're not going to have a lowered reduction of lifestyle necessarily. Obviously everybody's situation is going to be different, but you could be far more immune from tax law changes. Although we're 2 days after the election, who knows what's going to happen now.
I do.
So, but anyway, but being able to piece all of that together to help insulate from the risk and put yourself in a better position is the crux of the book. And the question then becomes, as long as your client actually reads it, do they now, because you provided the book, will they trust the advice that you're giving because that'll be in line with the overall message of the book? And then will they see that you're actually on their best, for their best interest and putting them in a better position? Okay, I mentioned the election. Did you want to have some comments on that?
Yes, I would like to put in my 2 cents here. So, so Trump won. Republicans that Cynthia is happy with that. So Trump won.
Just a little bit. I can't tell how enthusiastic she possibly is, but anyway.
Yes, if only she would gesticulate a little bit more, we could get a read on what she's thinking. So, so Trump wins. He controls the Senate. He's well on his way to controlling the House over that. They haven't completely called that yet. He's on his way to controlling the House. And he campaigned on the idea that he would extend the Trump tax cuts. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do I think is going to happen? I think, to be able to extend those tax cuts, you only have to have a simple majority. And he'll do it through budget reconciliation. And it'll happen in October of 2025. That's when budget reconciliation typically happens. And so what we're probably going to see is we're going to see an extension of those tax cuts starting in 2026. What does that mean? That means that we will have 9 years of historically low tax rates. But here's the double-edged sword here. I really pay attention to a lady named Maya McGinnis. She's the president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. I've interviewed her on my podcast. She's in my movie. I really, really like her. She's very, very smart. She says she's done the math. She says that if they don't have some sort of offsets for the tax cuts, that it's going to increase the national debt by $5 trillion, in addition to the $2 trillion per year that we're already experiencing over that time frame. So yes, we have opportunity as advisors to be able to take advantage of historically low tax rates, I believe, for 9 more years. But it's also going to create even more urgency with our clients and prospects because of what this whole thing is going to do to the national debt. So I guess the bottom line here is if you're in this career and you're raising the warning cry about the future of higher tax rates and you're helping people develop a balanced, comprehensive approach to tax-free retirement, there's never a better time to be doing what we're doing. If ever there were a time in the history of the world where we could be doing this type of planning for people, it's now. And so fingers crossed that Trump follows through on that campaign pledge. I think he's got a really good group of people that are surrounding him. A lot of smart guys. He's got Elon Musk. He's got Robert Kennedy. He's got Vivek Ramaswamy. So really good group of people. I think much better than he had in his first term. And these guys are ready to buoy him up and help him do what is ultimately in the best interest of America. I think that that's the lay of the land. I think that's what's going to happen. I could be wrong, but I think that we're going to have another 8 years more than we originally thought to be able to shield our clients' hard-earned retirement savings from the impact of higher taxes.
Yeah, and if for anybody that's curious, like, well, are you doing anything that's illegal? And obviously the answer is no, but we have a fiduciary duty, if we're going to use the term fiduciary. We have a duty to look out for our clients' best interest, not necessarily the federal government's. It's not our job to be fundraisers for the government. Our job is to look after our clients. Obviously, we're going to follow the laws, rules, and regulations. We're not suggesting anything of the sort. We're not avoiding anything, but we're looking out after for the client. Now, if anybody wants some scary literature, look up Senator Ron Wyden, Wyden. Look up his report on treat wealth like wages. And he'll talk about a concept called anti-deferral accounting. And whether he's going to go back, I'm not say go back, but going forward, even if you haven't realized the capital gain, they want to impose a tax on unrealized capital gains each and every year. He's got it all outlined there. Good news is that with Trump taking over the White House and hopefully, getting the majorities in both the House and the Senate, we shouldn't see anything close to that being passed. There's Caleb Gilliams interviewed the NAFA president, forgot his name, Kevin Mayu, and they talked about all the implications of the election. And I think that everything else is going to be fine. I think they're not going to touch private placement life insurance. There's so many other things that were being cracks against everything we do that I think we're going to be able to put a stay up for, the good uh, you know, the next 8 years. And 8 years for the tax code, 4 years with Trump, and then who knows who's going to win after that. I think he picked very well. I think JD Vance interviews very well and holds his own. He's not afraid to go on the offense when he's feeling like yet he's still very civil. Um, anyway, the podcast stuff has been amazing. I wish I could invite them over, but I don't have those connections. That would have been great. Okay, Cynthia, you've been patient with your hand up. What's your question?
My question is for David. How do you think the no tax on Social Security, should it pass, would benefit us to help our clients? How do you see that playing out?
Um, so I think that it's going to increase the debt. I'm not sure how they're going to make up the hole in Social Security that results from eliminating that tax. The money's going to have to come from somewhere. I don't know where it would come from. They'd have to raise taxes. Currently, you can't raise income taxes to pay for Social Security taxes. They're two separate columns and they can't be intermingled. But that doesn't mean, I talked to David Walker about this. He says that doesn't mean it won't happen somewhere down low, but current law says you can't raise income taxes to pay for Social Security. So they would have to plug that hole somehow, some way. And I don't know how you do that. What Trump has proposed is that you eliminate Social Security tax on seniors, not on everybody else. So what it really
Right.
means is that everybody else is going to have to pay higher taxes on their Social Security. I don't think that's going to go over all that well. So I think ultimately that was a campaign plot promise that may have been one of those things that Trump was just throwing out there without really thinking through the implications of it. And then Trump, that is one of his things that he does, is he throws things out there that aren't always super well vetted before he says them, but that's part and parcel of who he is. And so I just don't think that's going to happen. If it did happen, it just means that tax-free planning is going to be a little bit less sexy for people that are in retirement, because one of the huge benefits is getting Social Security tax-free if you can get to a 0% tax bracket. If you can get Social Security tax-free without getting to a 0% tax bracket, that's one less motivation that people will have to get to the 0% tax bracket. So I'm not
Mm,
worried about it at all. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that we're still going to be able to talk about Roth IRAs and Roth conversions and Roth 401ks and cash value life insurance, all in concert one with another, to help people shield their retirement savings, and their Social Security from the impact of higher taxes down the road.
Now, could
Yeah,
it be so that, how Elon Musk did his company and it's performing great, and he can come and cut a bunch of reckless spending that's actually not helping America with these federal agencies, and use that money then instead of increasing the income tax rate?
You could. It doesn't solve the broader problem. I mean, really, we have a $239 trillion underfunding, and so I don't care how great Elon Musk is, although he is great, that there's just not enough pork that you can cut out of the budget to plug that hole. It's just not even close. I mean, the way that Larry Kotlikoff out of Boston University said, you have to have $239 trillion sitting in a bank account today, earning treasury rates 5%, to be able to to deliver on everything that we promised that we can't afford to pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt. It's just getting to the point where you wonder if they have any plan at all for ever paying this stuff back, or at least staunching the growth of it. And it's just to the point where we just have to do the best we can over the next 8 to 9 years to help as many people as we can, and then let the chips fall where they may, because it's not looking awesome at this point.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Let's suppose that Trump was able to do all that. Now, Grant, I agree with you, Dave. I think he's making campaign promises that just don't necessarily make sense, or at least he can't do them in the first year. That's for sure. Where he passed the Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act the first year at the end of 2017, enacted for 2018. But unless we have that drilling going on, or there's some new revenues coming in to offset this stuff, I don't see how he can do it without making the national debt worse. Of course, like you, I delineate tax economics from tax policy. So the question, I mean, we're still looking at the national debt, but even if he waived all of that, let's say he waived IRMA, and he waived the taxes on Social Security income, how long will it last? And which means that we've got opportunities now to reposition clients to be protected and inoculated from, at least the way the tax code works and the way that people have been grandfathered in the past, that they could reposition it and they could be far more secure and they could use more of their money to do it. So there's still
Dave, real
opportunities
quick,
for that.
before we go any further, let me throw this how to get the book at the discount. Let me throw that up here.
Oh,
And then I
yes.
do have a hard stop at about 3:56, so about 4
Okay.
minutes. So let me just share my screen real quick. You got to turn your sharing on. So let me send you
I'm
that
sorry.
request.
There it is.
Okay. So this is a QR code. And so just use your camera. It'll take you to the website. Do not get the book off of Amazon. If you get the book off of Amazon, it will cost you a full $20. Okay. If you go to this website, you use the code Guru Today Only, all uppercase, all one word. It is case sensitive. You use that at the end of the checkout process. You'll save $5 on every book that you buy. If ever there were a time in your life where you think you wanted to purchase this book in 1, 10, 20, 50, every book that you buy, you'll save $5. I'm actually subsidizing this out of my own pocket. That's why it's as cheap as it is. I want to sell as many of these things as I can. I'd love to make it a New York Times bestseller. Can't do it without your help. So Guru Today Only, get 10 or 20 copies for your clients, and it'll set the table for a Power of Zero sale, and simultaneously debunk what they're likely to see on the internet if they were to research your recommendation. So, and then you'll get the book shipped to you the week of December 10th when it launches. So this is, I think, a great way to get yourself an early Christmas present, or get your clients an early Christmas present.
There you go. And if you make it a big enough splash, maybe Ramsey will invite you onto his podcast.
Don't hold your breath.
Fair enough. But if you make a big enough splash, like, come on, bring them on. Hey, we'd be happy to have that debate. That would be a fun one.
Totally.
Logan asked the question. I know you've addressed this question before, but won't they just print the currency via the Federal Reserve just like they have in the past? I mean, but even printing currency, there's still consequences of financing the printing of that currency, and so that's where my mind is going here.
Well, if you watch my movie, The Power of Zero, The Tax Train is Coming, we interviewed a guy out of Berkeley. So UCal Berkeley, professor named Alan Arbach. He actually addresses this. He says, when you print money, what happens? You get inflation. We've seen that. That's why Kamala Harris, one of the big reasons why she didn't get elected was the inflation. So you get inflation. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are all linked to inflation by law. In other words, they have to go up when inflation goes up. So when you try to print your way out of those particular problems, you're just increasing the problem commensurately. You print money, you get inflation. The cost of these programs go up commensurately. It's like a dog chasing its tail. You never really solve the problem. So you literally cannot solve that $239 trillion problem by printing $239 trillion. You just can't do it. It's mathematically, it sort of violates the rules of the mathematical universe. So you get that a lot, but it's not a problem. The only way to solve the problem is either raising taxes, reducing the benefits, some combination of the two. Someone's going to have to make a tough decision.
There we go. Okay, so real quick, Cynthia asked a great question because you got a hard stop here in a minute. What would be the play to leverage your book with clients? I'm asking because I had a 60-year-old client come to my office. I gave him a tax-free retirement book. He had it for 4 weeks and didn't finish reading it. I got it back, but no appointment.
Well, so this book is definitely more scandalizing. So you may get more eyes on this book just as a result of how radioactive the topic is. And so it really is, people will look at it and be like, it's a hit piece. Well, it's not a hit piece. And I say that over and over again. There's a lot about what these guys do that I like, but I think that you're more likely to it's a little bit more of a gripping subject because it's so controversial. And so I think that you're more likely to get them to read it. They're going to get spoon-fed all of the Power Zero concepts they need to be spoon-fed, and they're going to get the debunking of what the gurus say before they ever see it on the internet. So it's like sort of packaged all together into one read. So I think it's a great way to set the table for a conversation.
There we go. Perfect. Well, Dave, thanks so much for your time. Great book, everybody. You do need to get it, at least read it, at least for yourself. Figure out if you're going to be able to get it out to your clients. And by the way, in case you're wondering, yes, Dave does mention IUL in the book. Yes, you can position whole life just as well. It's not a big deal.
Totally.
It's a non-issue. So
Right.
just in case you're kind of wondering. So anyway, everybody, thank you very much. And we'll
Thanks,
let you go.
everybody.
And
Thank you,
yeah,
David,
order
so
some books.
much.
All
You're
right.
welcome back.
Thank you all. See you in the groups. Bye-bye.